Authorities in Greece have declared a state of emergency after several days of consecutive earthquakes on the island of Santorini.
New York City, Miami, or Seattle, modern coastal cities that could be submerged in a single night if a supervolcano suddenly awakens and unleashes massive tsunamis. This scenario, which seems like mere science fiction, actually occurred more than 3 millennia ago. The Thera Santorini volcano erupted with power hundreds of times greater than a nuclear bomb, burying the city of Akrotiri under a sea of ash, unleashing tsunamis tens of meters high that devastated the island of Crete and pushing the glorious Minoan civilization to the brink of collapse. Many scholars believe this catastrophe is the origin of the Atlantis legend. What is terrifying is that, according to geologists, the Santorini volcanic system is still active and could completely reenact the disaster from more than 3,600 years ago. So, if Santorini erupts again, could modern coastal cities like Athens or Alexandria withstand it? To understand why this threat is not at all far-fetched, we must return to where it once happened. Around the early 2nd millennium BCE, while much of Europe was still dotted with primitive agricultural communities, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, an advanced and brilliant civilization had risen, the Minoan. Its center was the island of Crete, a world full of magnificent palaces, bustling trading ports, and exquisite art. Structures like Knossos, Phaistos, and Malea were not only residences for the nobility, but also administrative and religious centers, with long corridors, spiral staircases, and walls covered in vibrant frescoes. The Minoans were Europe's first maritime empire. From Crete, their characteristic longships with curved prows sailed throughout the Mediterranean, carrying olive oil, wine, fine pottery, and luxury goods in exchange for gold, ivory, tin, and precious stones. Ancient Egyptian records called them Keftiu, wealthy merchants from the northern seas. This widespread trade helped Crete become an economic, artistic, and technological hub far ahead of its time. One of the highlights of this network was the island of Thera, now Santorini. Here, the port city of Akrotiri thrived like a Singapore of the Bronze Age. Modern archaeology reveals a sophisticatedly planned urban area streets paved with volcanic stone, a 2-tier drainage system, multi-story houses with balconies and spiral staircases. Notably, the homes even had plumbing and private sanitation, something much of Europe would wait thousands of years to achieve. The frescoes at Akrotiri are an invaluable archive of Minoan life, elaborately decorated sailing ships filling the harbors, processions of worshippers, vibrant landscapes of mountains and waters, even images of dolphins swimming alongside boats. This atmosphere exudes wealth, peace, and confidence, a society that believed it had conquered the seas and turned commerce into supreme power. Minoan culture was also distinguished by its refinement and richly symbolic religion. The bull associated with rituals of leaping over horns appears everywhere. The palaces had complex ceremonial rooms, preserving traces of a religion linked to the mother goddess and rites tied to crops and the sea. Minoan art avoided brutality. Instead, it featured humans in harmony with nature, fish, birds, flowers, and a liberated coastal lifestyle. It was thanks to the Aegean Sea that the Minoans reached their peak of prosperity. The strategic positions of Crete and Thera allowed them to control trade routes connecting Europe, Africa, and the Near East. Minoan merchants not only carried goods, but also spread architectural styles, art, and even writing linear A to neighboring regions. Archaeologists often compare the Minoans to an ancient Venice, wealthy, bustling with trade, with a strong navy, and confident in long-term stability. But all that glory stood on fragile ground. Thera, home to the city of Akrotiri, was actually the rim of one of the largest supervolcanoes in the ancient world, though the inhabitants at the time had no idea. They saw the island as a strategic trading port, an ideal place to anchor ships and exchange goods. No one suspected that this very land had erupted multiple times in the distant past and was quietly building up terrifying power before the Great Catastrophe around 1628-1600 BCE. Thera had gone through a period of instability. Seismic studies and analyses of volcanic rock show the island's surface bulging, a typical sign of magma accumulation. In seabed sediments, scientists have found evidence of minor eruptions and successive earthquakes. However, people at the time had no scientific concept of volcanoes. Archaeology has uncovered silent clues about the anxiety of Akrotiri's inhabitants. Some house walls were reinforced with new wooden beams. Foundations were repaired. Many structures were left unfinished, as if construction was abruptly interrupted. Notably, in the early ash layers at Akrotiri, there are traces of precursor eruptions, light ash, and scattered pumice falling before the main explosion. Many experts speculate, but evacuating their homes did not mean understanding the scale of the disaster. The minor eruptions might have only caused dust and temporarily halted construction. No one imagined that the entire island was about to explode with power beyond physical evidence. There are legendary memories the Aegean region had long passed down oral tales of angry seas and sinking lands. Later, Plato in his works, Timaeus and Critias described Atlantis, a wealthy empire destroyed in a single day by earthquakes and the sea. Many scholars believe the memory of Thera was transformed over centuries into this myth. Neighboring communities. Natural signs are also clearly reflected in modern scientific data. Tree ring studies from Ireland and Greenland show unusual growth years just before and after the eruption, likely due to volcanic aerosols blocking sunlight, causing cold summers and slowed tree growth. In Greenland, ice cores. Scientists have detected sulfuric acid layers matching the eruption timing, indicating a large-scale climate event affecting the entire northern hemisphere. Thera's volcanic ash has also been found at many sites across the eastern Mediterranean, from Crete to Turkey and even Egypt, proving the explosion's power spread far wider than once imagined. Yet, in the Minoan era, humans had no concept. Some archaeologists even hypothesize that the Minoan elite who controlled trade and religion may have downplayed or hidden information about risks to avoid panic and economic disruption. This made the entire society. What makes modern scientists particularly shudder is the Thera volcano has never truly died. Its magma accumulation cycle did not end after the destructive explosion 3,600 years ago. Recent GPS measurements and gravity studies showed that the island of Nea Kameni, rising in the middle of the volcanic crater, is quietly inflating slightly, like a hot breath from the Earth's depths. No one knows when it will awaken. But volcanology, the lesson from the past is terrifying natural warnings always appear, but humans often refuse to believe. The Minoans once saw the ground shake, the mountains smoke, but thought it was just the island's familiar sigh. They could not imagine a force strong enough to wipe out an entire fleet. Today, we have satellites, seismometers, tsunami warning networks, but confidence and a sense of security still lead many coastal cities to believe it won't happen to us. Santorini is a chilling reminder that the Earth is not asleep. Beneath the blue waters and the spectacular cliffs where tourists take photos, a machine of destruction is quietly charging, and if it awakens, then one day, the familiar chain of tremors suddenly turned into something unprecedented. Thera began to roar like a gigantic beast awakening. First came deep explosions from the Earth's bowels, followed by columns of black smoke billowing high. Modern geologists call this phase a Plinian eruption, the most violent type, with ash columns reaching the stratosphere. For the inhabitants of Akrotiri, it must have been a horrifying sight never before seen. When the magma pressure reached its peak, the volcanic crater exploded. Billions of tons of rock, ash, and toxic gases shot straight into the air. Temperatures soared, the air heavy with sulfur. Ash began to pour down like black rain, covering rooftops, streets, and ships. Scientists estimate Thera's ash column reached 35 kilometers high, hundreds of times stronger than the 1991 Pinatubo eruption. The initial phase alone, but that was only the beginning, as the massive magma chamber below emptied too quickly. Thera's caldera collapsed, creating one of the largest known volcanic collapses. Waves of Nuae Ardente, superfast clouds of hot gas and rock debris rushed into the sea at hundreds of degrees Celsius. This collapse displaced a huge volume of water, generating tsunamis. Those gigantic walls of water may have swept away the Minoan fleet, obliterating seaside ports and grain stores. Archaeology at Cretan coastal sites like Malea and Palicastro has uncovered tsunami sediment layers filled with pumice, marine sand, and shattered pottery, evidence of sudden devastation. Not only was infrastructure wiped out, but the regional climate was also upended. Thick ash blanketed the sky, lowering summer temperatures. Tree ring studies from Ireland, Greenland, and ice cores show sulfuric aerosols spreading as far as the Arctic, causing widespread crop failures. The wheat and grape fields that sustained the Minoans may not have. From the perspective of neighboring communities, this event must have seemed almost supernatural. A wealthy city suddenly vanished under ash. The seas rose to engulf everything. The sky darkened for days. It's not hard to see how memories of this catastrophe were gradually woven into myth, a proud empire punished by the gods in an instant. Centuries later, although debates persist about the tsunami's extent and the eruption's scale, most studies agree that Thera was one of the strongest volcanic explosions in human history. The ejected material is estimated at over 60 km3, enough to alter the northern hemisphere's climate for years. Some comparisons suggest it was many times larger than the 1883 Krakatoa eruption. Notably, scientists believe Thera's collapse did not occur in a single explosion, but in a prolonged sequence. Initial eruptions drove people from the island, followed by the massive blast and caldera collapse. This multi-phase nature explains why Akrotiri has few human remains. Residents had time to flee, but they could not escape the long after Thera's fury, when the city of Akrotiri was buried and the Minoan naval network vanished. This event not only left ash in the geological strata, but also etched deeply into humanity's collective memory. More than 1,000 years later, it seemed around the 4th century BCE. The Greek philosopher Plato recounted in his works Timaeus and Critias a wealthy, proud empire possessing a massive fleet and superior craftsmanship. That empire vanished in a single dreadful day and night after earthquakes and the sea. This description eerily matches Santorini, a wealthy island with widespread trade reflecting Crete and Minoan ports. A mighty fleet swept away like the Minoan navy engulfed by tsunamis. Earthquakes and seas swallowing in an instant, akin to Thera's caldera collapse and tsunami. Many scholars believe Plato may have drawn from One of the biggest debates revolves around the exact timing of the Thera eruption. Geologists and natural scientists, based on analyses of fossilized olive branches, tree rings, and Greenland ice cores, date it to 1628-1600 BCE, while traditional archaeologists, relying on pottery and trade links with Egypt, favor a later date, 1550-1500 BCE. This nearly century-wide gap is not just dry numbers, but determines how we link the Thera disaster to the Minoan collapse. If Thera erupted early, the Minoans survived for decades before collapsing. If late, the eruption could be the direct fate. Another hotly debated question is whether Thera's tsunamis truly swept away the Minoan fleet and ports. Some marine sediment studies at Malea and Palicastro found layers of pumice and sea sand, indicating tsunamis up to 35 meters high, spreading across the Aegean and possibly reaching Egypt's shores. But some scientists counter that Crete's topography and sediment distribution suggest more localized impacts, not enough to single-handedly erase the entire empire. According to them, despite over a century of excavations, modern science still doesn't fully understand Thera. Much of Akrotiri remains unexcavated, buried deep under thick ash, underwater. Sonar and LiDAR maps lack resolution to reconstruct the caldera's shape before and after the explosion, leaving models of eruption power and collapse scale reliant on assumptions. Even tree rings and ice cores considered key climate evidence could be confounded by other near-contemporary eruptions. Though dismissed by many scholars as allegory, Atlantis remains a powerful symbol. It reminds us that even the most confident, prosperous civilization can be erased by a single natural upheaval. This allure makes Thera an endless topic for books, films, and even conspiracy theories about aliens or lost technology. But what is worrisome is if science still cannot unify on an eruption that happened 3,600 years ago with ample geological, archaeological, and climate evidence, can we adequately predict a new one? Santorini today is still quietly accumulating magma. Nea Kamenni continues to inflate, but humanity debates the scale and impact of the previous eruption. This uncertainty is the scariest part. We know enough to recognize its danger, but not enough to predict or prevent with certainty. It is fertile ground after Thera unleashed its fury. The Minoan world did not collapse in a single day, but its foundations were shaken beyond repair. The disaster did not just take a city or a fleet, it initiated a chain of upheavals lasting decades, disintegrating the once with the fleet gone and seaside ports heavily damaged. The Minoans lost their international trade network, the lifeblood of their economy, without large ships to transport olive oil, wine, and pottery to Egypt and the Near East. Crete fell into gradual isolation. Rebuilding the most terrifying aftermath came from the atmosphere. Ash and sulfuric gases from Thera rose high into the stratosphere, creating a veil blocking sunlight over vast areas. Tree ring data from Ireland, Greenland, and Arctic ice cores record multiple years of unusually cold summers, chaotic weather, and sharply reduced agricultural yields. For a society dependent on stable farm output, this was a fatal blow. Already depleted stockpiles after the disaster could not be replenished, leading to prolonged famine. Goods that once fueled trade power, like as the economy plummeted, power centralized in the palaces began to crumble. Centers that once controlled production, trade, and religion now lacked resources to sustain themselves. Archaeology shows many palaces, like Malea and Zakros, were abandoned or burned in the century following the eruption, reflecting profound social upheavals. Religion also lost its credibility. The mother goddess and bull rituals, which dominated Minoan spiritual life, may have weakened as people witnessed nature's destruction without divine protection. A society once confident in that power vacuum. The Mycenaeans from mainland Greece rose, already deeply influenced by Minoan trade and art. They quickly exploited Crete's weakness. Around 1450 BCE, archaeology shows dense Mycenaean traces in Cretan palaces, especially at Knossos. Administrative systems shifted from undeciphered Linear A to Greek-derived Linear B. Mycenaean architectural and pottery styles replaced Minoan culture. Thera's impact was not limited to the Aegean Sea. Egypt, during the Second Intermediate Period, recorded climate instability and disrupted trade. Many historians believe famine and supply disruptions may have contributed to weakening the pharaonic court. In the Levant and Asia Minor, exchange networks were interrupted, causing The story of the Minoan collapse is a chilling reminder for all coastal societies. They once believed in enduring wealth and stability, but nature needed only one outburst to erase it all. And what is worrisome is that Santorini has never died. Modern GPS measurements show magma still accumulating, with the young land of Nea Kamenni emerging in the volcanic crater, quietly inflating. If a brilliant civilization like the Minoans, with international trade and advanced cities, could collapse from a single eruption, are today's coastal megacities New York, Miami? Looking back at the Minoan decline is not just an archaeological or historical tale, it is a mirror for the present, showing that prosperity and technology do not guarantee absolute safety. When nature decides to stir, an empire or a megacity can collapse in just days, just as Santorini today has become a symbol of tourism. White cliffs plunging into the blue sea, blue-roofed houses sparkling under Mediterranean sun. Millions of tourists come here to enjoy the beauty, few realizing the land they stand on is still a living supervolcano, right beneath the ancient rock and ash. Magma is quietly accumulating. Modern GPS devices and gravity studies. Volcanologists repeatedly emphasize Santorini is not a dead volcano. The question is not whether it will erupt again, but when and to what extent the next eruption will be. History shows Thera's cycle can span thousands of years between major explosions. But geological changes over the past century, minor eruptions at Nea Kamenni. So what would happen if Santorini erupts again? Modern simulation scenarios show that even a medium-scale eruption could generate tsunamis tens of meters high, spreading across the Mediterranean. A massive explosion, like the one 300 to 600 years ago, could disrupt global trade, devastate coastal infrastructure, and force millions to evacuate. Particularly, the Mediterranean is now a vital shipping route, home to major ports like Athens, Alexandria. But Santorini's warning is not just for the Aegean. Supervolcano-threatened coastal megacities worldwide: New York, Miami, Seattle, Tokyo, Jakarta are betting their safety on technology and early warning systems. We have satellites, seismic networks, tsunami forecasting models. But history shows modern science still hasn't fully unified on the Thera eruption that ended 3,600 years ago. If we still don't, moreover, today's coastal cities are far more complex than the Minoan world. Dense infrastructure, crowded populations, global transportation and supply chains make potential damage exponentially greater. A major eruption with tsunamis could paralyze maritime transport, destroy ports, disrupt energy, and global supply chains. Imagine New York with its skyscrapers, Miami with millions. The Santorini disaster also reminds us of human complacency. The Minoans once believed tremors and ash were just familiar occurrences. Today, despite advanced monitoring technology, many cities expand into risk zones, filling wetlands, building high-rises right by the sea. The belief it won't happen to us, which caused the Minoans to miss. Additionally, there is the challenge of climate change, rising sea levels, melting ice, stronger storms. A supervolcano eruption combined with tsunamis and global climate shifts could create a double disaster, destroying coastal infrastructure and disrupting climate long-term. Like how Thera once caused years of crop failures. Modern Santorini is thus not just an archaeological story. It is a mirror reflecting the future a once prosperous civilization with advanced technology and international trade networks, but still swept away in days. Today, modern coastal cities may be treading the same path, developing right at the water's edge. The final question echoes. As cold as the volcanic ash covering Akrotiri 300 or 600 years ago, Are we truly ready if Santorini or another supervolcano erupts this century? Our technology may forecast and save millions of lives, but it could also prove powerless against the force the Minoans once underestimated. And if history can repeat, cities like